An important concept from normative economics that you will encounter in this book is equity, which refers to the idea of being fair or just. The idea of equity or fairness is a normative concept because fairness depends on people's beliefs or value judgments, which differ from person to person. Equality, on the other hand, is a state of being equal with respect to something. For example, equality with respect to income would mean that each member of a society receives exactly the same income. Equality is a positive concept since two or more things are either equal or not equal based on a measure. I'm back. Sorry for that. Yep, and we'll have to cover this very important yellow bubble. Equity means fairness, while equality means being the same. While the two concepts have different meanings, in economics, inequity is most often interpreted to mean inequality, while equity is interpreted to mean equality. Note that the pursuit of equity in the sense of equality does not refer to efforts to achieve complete income or wealth equality, but rather the reduction of inequalities that are considered to be unfair. So what this is saying is that pursuits of equity pursuits of equity are not measures to make everyone equal in the economy. The pursuits of equity, the point is to not to make everyone have the same amount of money, everyone to receive the same income. That would not make sense in a capitalistic market. What equity refers to is to eliminate those factors such as lack of education or those underfunded, under-resourced uh, uh, demographic. So what equity is to reduce that unfairness, a natural unfairness. That is what equity is. Equity is not equity does not exist to fully eradicate inequality. So there's a very important concept that you might find a little confusing. They even sound the same, equity, equality. It's really just two alphabets that change the entire meaning, but that is a very important thing that you have to understand. Now we're going to cover a small TOK topic. TOK 1.2. Why do economists often disagree? As you will discover in the course of reading this book, there are many areas of economic theory as well as policy on which there are major disagreements and debates among economists. Why do economists disagree so much? It would seem that use of the specific method in economics by forcing hypothesis to undergo tests and allowing the real-world evidence to sift through valid and invalid hypotheses would eliminate much agreement. Why do economists continue to disagree in spite of the use of the specific method? To try to answer this question, we should consider the point mentioned earlier on the difficulties of testing hypotheses due to the inability of economists to perform controlled experiments. Now, the economy is really difficult. It's a very difficult environment to control, to perform controlled experiments. The economy is not a science lab. You cannot control factors. You cannot have an independent, dependent, or control variable. Everything is much random. Everything is very much influenced by each external or internal market influence. So it's very hard to test out these theories. So one of the main economic disagreements you're going to find throughout the course are the Keynesian economics and the new classical economists. Now, that will be in macro, but yeah, economists rarely agree. They rarely agree, and however, their basic point, they all base their point off of similar concepts. However, you'll rarely find good economists, agree with each other. That is one thing to note. Okay, 1.5. Brief history of economic thought. The origins of economic ideas. After studying this section, you will be able to define all the terms appearing in orange, explain the major schools of thought from the 18th century to the present. The history of economic thought is a fascinating account of how economic ideas have evolved over the years. Many of the economic ideas and theories you will learn about in your study of economics can be traced back to the contributions of famous economists who lived and worked decades, even centuries ago. Although economic thinking has developed and progressed over time, leading to a deeper understanding of economic events, many of these contributions still lie at the heart of economics that we study today. It is only then that you will be able to appreciate the richness of the ideas of these famous economists, because only then will you be able to recognize in their work your own understanding of economics. Until about the 18th century, there were no distinct disciplines as we know them today. Investigations of events and phenomena in the social world were part of what was known as moral philosophy, while investigation of events and phenomena in the natural world were part of what was known as natural philosophy. I see. This is double typed. Ignore that. In the area of what we know as economics, scholars and philosophers since the time of the ancient Greeks, 2,500 years ago, have concerned themselves with ideas that tried to explain economic events, but no one had attempted to provide a theory explaining the economy in a systematic way. The first scholar to do this was Adam Smith. The 18th century, Adam Smith and laissez-faire, I cannot pronounce that. Adam Smith, a Scottish philosopher and political economist, often considered to be the father of economics, author of an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. The wealth of nations for short. Now we'll take a dive into history and learn about Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a Scottish philosopher who is often referred to as the father of economics. Adam Smith studied moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow and at Oxford University, eventually ending up back at the University of Glasgow, where he taught moral philosophy. He is best known for the ideas expressed in his book, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. The Wealth of Nations is considered to be a masterpiece that has influenced economics for generations up to the present day. Although it borrows heavily from the ideas of various scholars of the time, it represents the first attempt ever to set forth a comprehensive theory of how an economy can hold itself together, functioning in a harmonious way, and how such an economy can grow over time. Adam Smith lived at a time when the traditional rights of rulers to impose authoritarian controls and restrictions on their subjects in Europe was coming more and more under attack. Smith believed that strong repressive governments were not essential to the workings of an economy. He therefore set out to show how an economic system without government cannot merely function, but could moreover thrive and prosper to the great benefit of its citizens. In this task, Smith borrowed heavily from the ideas of the natural laws set forth by Isaac Newton, the great mathematician, physicist, astronomer, and theologian. Just as Newton discovered in natural laws that govern the physical world with harmonious regularity, so Smith believed he was uncovering the natural laws of the social world that govern economic relations with the same regularity. Smith begins with the idea of a market and the behavior of individuals in a market that will produce beneficial results for the whole of society. He shows with painstaking detail and numerous examples in The Wealth of Nations that if individuals behave in a self-interested way so that each person tries to do the best for herself or himself, there will result a greater good for society. In a famous quote from The Wealth of Nations, Smith writes, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Such behavior gives rise to competition, which regulates the behavior of people acting in their self-interest. Competition is very important because it keeps people's self-interest in check. Suppose, for example, that a producer of shoes raises prices to a high level, expecting more personal gain. Other producers of shoes who also want to sell their products will sell them at a lower price, so the high price seller will be forced to lower the price. This process continues until the price of shoes fall to the lowest possible level. Similarly, competition will lead to the production of those goods and services that are mostly wanted, because self-interest will lead producers to make those goods and they will be able to sell. In the same way, occupations that are difficult or dangerous will command higher wages, because workers will only be willing to take on such jobs if the wages are high enough to compensate them for the hard work and risks. These ideas gave rise to the famous expression, the invisible hand of markets. Now, this is very important. Everyone needs to write this down, which refers to the presence of thousands or millions of individual decisions made by individual decision makers that are self-regulated through interactions in markets, without the presence of a government deciding what, how much to produce. The invisible hand results in a more efficient use of resources. This is also known as a laissez-faire economy, from French meaning let it do, which refers to a free market without government intervention. It is not necessary to have a government telling people what to do or how to do it, because the market working on its own can do a much better job of this. However, Adam Smith did foresee a role for government as well. Governments, in his view, have three important functions: to take care of national defense, to oversee security and a system of justice, and to provide public infrastructure, roads, bridges, canals, and so on. Why? Because we explored in the lesson before, roads, bridges, canals, and so on. These are public goods. Public goods don't produce profits. So therefore, it lacks an incentive for personal or private corporations to provide, which are essential to the proper functioning of an economy and therefore should be financed from taxation. The idea of competition being central to Smith's ideas was carried further. Smith was very concerned about the possible growth of firms to become large corporations or monopolies, which would restrict competition. He was keenly aware of the power of large firms to raise the prices to high levels and keep them there due to the absence of competition. As he wrote, "The price of monopoly is upon every occasion the highest which can be got. The natural price, or the price of free competition, on the contrary, is the lowest which can be taken." Smith believes that competition would ensure the monopolies and large corporations will not be able to arise. The wealth of nations also presents a theory of economic growth. Economic growth is seen to depend on the division of labor, the separation of processes into many different tasks, each one performed by different workers, which permits specialization of labor to take place. Specialization of labor involves the pursuit of workers by a particular task involving skills appropriate to the task in question. If workers specialize in particular activities that they can perform best, then more output will be produced, and this will lead to economic growth. Now you see, this excerpt is not like a mere history lesson. It's touching on very important concepts of the economy. Smith extended the idea of specialization beyond what takes place within countries to international trade between countries. He is responsible for the idea of absolute advantage of a country in international trade. According to this idea, if each country produces the goods it can produce at the lowest costs and trades them for goods produced at the lower cost in other countries, then all the countries involved will be better off. Therefore, Adam Smith was an advocate of free trade without restrictions. The theory of absolute advantage, yes, will be discussed in chapter 14. Now, this is an HL only, high level only concept, but since our class is a higher level class, we will cover that as well. Whereas Smith wrote that self-interested behavior leads to the beneficial, invisible hand of the market. He did not write that people's actions are determined only by self-interest. In an earlier book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, Smith argued that people have the ability to put themselves in the position of another person. In other words, to empathize. This makes them behave in ways that create happiness for other people, because doing so gives them pleasure. This is important because in later years, Smith's idea were misinterpreted to mean that people behave only selfishly and with greed. The concepts of demand, supply, and markets that you will read about in chapter 2 are extensions of elaborations of Adam Smith's thinking. Yes. Now that was a history of Adam Smith and various important economic concepts. The 19th century. The economic ideas that developed during the 19th century are known as classical economics. Economic thinking was modified and refined considerably since the time of Adam Smith. The main economists of the time were concerned with issues like the process of economic growth and the distribution of income. A number of scholars made important contributions, such as David Ricardo and Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill.